300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me. Slightly later start today, but glad you could join me on a Monday morning. A lot to recap from sports. The Indian Wells Masters Tennis Tournament took place. We had some first-time winners, which I'm excited to talk about. The Chicago Sky won their first WNBA title. NBA starts tomorrow. Cannot wait to preview what that season is going to look like. MLB playoffs are in full swing, but I want to start today with only one. I decided to be a little bit selective today. Only one NFL game really kind of caught my eye over the weekend, and that was the Ravens and the Chargers. Now, since one of the most bizarre games that I've ever witnessed, in which the Baltimore Ravens lost to the Las Vegas Raiders on the opening weekend of the NFL season, the Ravens all of a sudden have rattled off 5 straight wins. They're 5-1 all of a sudden, despite, again, one of the most bizarre football games that I've ever seen in the NFL. And they were sluggish out of the gates to start the season, collected their first win against the Chiefs, thanks in large part due to the heroics of Lamar Jackson, but also the fumbling woes of the Chiefs. Then you come back up, it's the Justin Tuckered, the Detroit Lions, with the historic field goal. Then you knock off a Broncos team that at the time was undefeated. You follow that up with a victory over the Colts on Monday Night Football in overtime, and then most recently against the Chargers yesterday. So by hook or by crook, the Baltimore Ravens have defeated the AFC favorites in the Kansas City Chiefs and the new hot, trendy pick that everyone's been swooning over in the LA Chargers and Justin Herbert. And all of a sudden, they're 5-1. They are a 5-1 football team. One of the few 5-1 football teams in the league, along with the Rams at 5-1. The Cardinals are 6-0, and the Buffalo Bills play tonight. They're 4-1 with the potential of going 5-1. So this is one of the reasons why I've never understood this narrative surrounding Lamar Jackson about he's not a winning player. He's not a winning football player. I've never understood this false narrative that you can't win with Lamar Jackson. He's not a Super Bowl caliber winning quarterback. Because at the end of the day, he simply just wins. And yesterday was a perfect example of how everything in a game can feel out of sorts, can feel out of whack, and yet you look up at the final score, and once again, Lamar Jackson is on the winning end of a football game. Because this is the latest example in which Lamar Jackson wasn't that good yesterday. Threw 2 interceptions, really wasn't as prolific of a runner or a passer yesterday. Yet, here you have the Baltimore Ravens blowing out the LA Chargers, who had been rolling The only loss was to a game-winning Greg Zuerlein field goal against the Cowboys, who in their own right have won 5 straight since the opening week. So you have a West Coast team in the Chargers. They're coming from the West Coast. They just scored 47 points against the Browns that have the second-rated defense in the NFL. And they got to play an early morning kickoff on the East Coast against the Baltimore Ravens team that ostensibly was playing on shorter rest, given the fact that they had to face the Colts on Monday Night Football. And yet everything about this game just felt weird. It felt extremely weird. And to be honest, there wasn't so much I could glean from this matchup as it pertains to the Chargers, because it was almost inexplicable what happened to them yesterday, how they almost imploded. None of the wide receivers could make any catches. Justin Herbert was throwing pinpoint passes, and they were just dropping everything. I don't know what happened to Mike Williams. I know he was questionable to play, and he really wasn't targeted at all. And I love Brandon Staley, the head coach, and I think that he's well on his way to having a really good, promising coaching career. He's young. He's bright. He's confident. He's defensive-minded. Why are you targeting, though, Jalen Guyton on 5 pass attempts, and especially on crucial 3rd and 4th downs? That didn't make any sense to me. You've got Keenan Allen. What are you doing throwing it to Jalen Guyton? No offense to Jalen Guyton. He was 1 for 5 on balls that were thrown to him that he caught. So it was a little bit uncharacteristic, the play calling from the Chargers, and again, the travel, going cross-country. There's not much I can glean from their perspective. And conversely, for the Ravens, this is a team that, again, Lamar Jackson didn't play that well. 1 touchdown pass, 2 interceptions. The defense played a lot better than the offense did, which, again, coming into this game, Ravens were a top 5 offense, not necessarily a top 5 defense. They're a middle-of-the-pack defense. Yet you look up at the scoreboard, 34-6. 34-6. Maintaining and controlling one of the hottest offenses in the NFL. Again, they scored 47 points, the Chargers did last week, to the Browns, who in many eyes are viewed as a title contender, at least before we started seeing the offensive woes of Baker Mayfield. We don't know what's going to happen with him and his shoulder, but that I digress. But again, what I take away from this, and especially the ultimate performance and the outcome, is this is Lamar Jackson's leadership rubbing off this team. This is Lamar Jackson's winning intangibles rubbing off this team. The confidence and the aura that he exudes just radiates the locker room. It radiates through the entire locker room and through the entire coaching staff, because this isn't a game where, if you were really watching it from start to finish, you're saying to yourself, yeah, the Ravens absolutely dominated it. You can't quite pinpoint exactly what the play of the game was. You just look up at the score, and the Ravens were dominating. So this is precisely why I've just never understood the idea that Lamar Jackson can't be a winning quarterback, isn't going to be winning at the next stage. This guy is 34-12. He just passed Dan Marino for the most wins before 25, which I'll touch on in my Malkins moments. He's led the Ravens to a top seed in the AFC. He's led the Ravens to the postseason twice as the starting quarterback, not just for taking over Joe Flacco a couple years ago. He's won a playoff game. He's slowly getting better and better. So I've always been enamored with Lamar Jackson. I've always been a fan of his, but I don't think it was hard to quantify how much his game impacts the rest of the team, because normally he had to be spectacular for the team to win. Yesterday was a perfect example of that not being the case, where the entire team just kind of rallied around him and around the confidence that they have in him and pulling out a victory. So I'm not going to make any bold proclamations or statements about the Chargers. I think this is kind of an anomaly game for them. I think this was just a clunker for them. They just didn't have juice. Early morning, East Coast kickoff. They just weren't ready. And the Ravens pounced on him. But this is significant in the standings, because now the Baltimore Ravens are sitting in a really good spot at 5-1 atop the AFC again. The Bills play tonight against the Titans. Who knows who's going to win that? If the Bills win, okay, then the Ravens and the Bills now battling now with the best record in the AFC. But now the Ravens have collected a huge tiebreaker over the Chargers, who are one of the best teams. So from a standings perspective, it's a really good win for the Ravens. Again, not sure what to take away, what to draw from the Chargers' perspective, but it's less about the Chargers today and more just a perfect example of how Lamar Jackson's playmaking and leadership skills were on full display and how that's permeated throughout this entire team. So big shout out to the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh, that entire coaching staff. Happy you guys are 5-1. Impressive win, start to finish. Impressive win, start to finish. So I want to transition to the MLB playoffs for a minute. The NLCS between the Dodgers and the Braves, people kind of forgot about it because it started on the weekend, but you look up and the Braves, for the second straight game, have walked it off against the Dodgers. They've taken a 2-0 lead in the NLCS. So, second straight game that the Dodgers, I'm going to say this, the second straight game that the Dodgers have won a playoff game against the Atlanta Braves in this NLCS. Game 1, Dodgers lead 2-0. In the 6th, they blow the lead, they lose 3-2. They leave seven runners on base. They out-hit the Braves 10-6, and they're 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position in Game 1, and they blow it and they lose 3-2. Game 2, yesterday. They get on the board quick. They lead 4-2 heading into the bottom of the 8th, and they leave 10 guys on base. They draw 9 walks, and they are 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position, and they blow it 5-4. So, in the first 2 games of the series, the Dodgers have left 17 guys on base and are 2 for 18 with runners in scoring position. Now, I know that the Braves this postseason have been the best team defensively against opposing teams with runners in scoring position, but this is a Dodgers attack that has been the best offense in baseball throughout the entire regular season. And mind you that for the Dodgers against the Giants, in that series, the team that scored the first run went on to win all 5 games. Every game the Dodgers won against the Giants, they scored first. They were on the board first. Now, for the second straight playoff game against the Braves, they've gone on the board first, and they've led 2-0 quickly. And they've blown this game away. Because this Dodgers team is clearly and head and shoulders by far the better team in this series. I mean, you just look. Visually, they look like the better team. You watch them play, you're saying to yourself, and I'm saying to myself, how are the Braves winning these games? You're almost just befuddled at the fact that they're winning these games because everything is suggesting and screaming out to you, Dodgers, Dodgers, Dodgers. And it's almost inexplicably surprising that at this point the Dodgers are still kind of blowing these playoff games to me. And their biggest impediment in games 1 and 2 was their biggest, which is their inability to hit, was their biggest impediment in several years past for this team in the postseason. That's been their biggest Achilles heel in years past. Their starting pitching hasn't been able to do well, which wasn't really the case tonight, although Scherzer was fine. He was pretty good yesterday. But their inability to string together hits. And it reared its ugly head again this postseason. And again against this Braves team. It's kind of hard to believe that this has happened. Now, in fairness, let me first congratulate the Braves because what they've been able to do this year is tremendous. The fact that this team is in the NLCS despite losing arguably their best player, or perhaps their second best player, and Ronald Acuna Jr. tore his ACL in July. And yet this team managed to rally around his injury and close out the season extremely well. They were one of the hottest teams in baseball. They finished 12-2 over the last 14 games. They had a winning streak of 9 at one point in the second half of the season. And in fairness, to start the year, if you were to look at my March 31st episode where I was previewing the MLB season, I did say the Atlanta Braves are the fourth best team in baseball, which isn't a slight on them. It's not a knock on them. I had them as the fourth best team in baseball, and right now they're in the top 4. So I'm not necessarily surprised that they're in the NLCS. I'm more impressed by the fact that they've managed to not only reach the NLCS, but lead 2-0 against the Dodgers team without Ronald Acuna Jr. So it's impressive what the Atlanta Braves have been doing. I don't want to take away anything from them, but I also don't want to overlook some of the injuries that have really kind of hampered this Dodgers team as well. No Max Muncy, one of the best hitters in baseball, a really solid first baseman for him. No Clayton Kershaw this entire postseason. Justin Turner didn't start, and he really didn't play. He came in to pinch hit in the top of the 8th inning, but we didn't get a full dose of Justin Turner. So those are 3 critical pieces that haven't been a part of this team, especially with Justin Turner missing the majority of Game 2. That's a major blow for this roster that, for whatever reason, is a little bit hot and cold offensively, leaving so many guys on base, which has been their biggest problem. So, I mean, you just watch these games, and by all accounts, I keep saying to myself, how do the Dodgers keep losing these games? They just clearly, visually, appear to be the much better team. But I kind of find myself questioning and wondering if maybe the Dodgers are just overlooking the Braves. Just like I keep thinking the Dodgers are going to beat the Braves team, and I'm almost looking past them to the World Series. Well, maybe that's what's happening with the Dodgers. They were so emotionally drained from that taxing series against the Giants in the NLDS that maybe to a certain degree the first game was kind of recuperating and recovering from that series. In Game 2, they thought that the Braves were just going to bend over once they took that 2-run lead in the 8th. And they thought that the Braves were going to acquiesce. But the thing is, this is an Atlanta Braves team that has had to live through heartbreak against the Dodgers. This is a team that led the Dodgers 3-1 in the NLCS last year. And so the irony is that Julio Urias, who unfortunately gave up the game-tying 2 runs in the 8th inning as a reliever, and in fairness, listen, he used to be a reliever for years, but throughout this entire season, he's been elevated to a starting pitcher. So yes, he came into relief in Game 5 against the Giants, but prior to that, he hadn't relieved in a baseball game in over a year. The last time he came into relief to pitch as a reliever was in last year's postseason. And he actually closed out this Atlanta Braves team in Game 7 as a reliever. And Kenley Jensen, I think he's in a really difficult spot there. It's a tough spot. You've got 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. You've got Albies over at second, and you got Rosario coming up to the plate, and Kenley Jensen's first pitch is smoked at 105 miles an hour right up the middle. Really difficult play for Seager to make, and in fairness, Seager actually made the in my opinion, a game-tying tag at second. Gratterall threw a really errant pass, a wild pass to him. He managed to collect it and tag the bag at second. So I'm not going to blame Seager for that. That's a difficult play to make, and a tough spot for Kenley Jensen to come in on. The only silver lining is history's on the Dodgers' side here, because this was the same identical score in the series last year. The Braves held a 2-0 lead over the Dodgers last year in very similar types of fashions. All 1-run games in the postseason in the NLCS. And the Dodgers had to overcome the 2-0 deficit and a 3-1 deficit. They had to rattle off 3 straight to win in 7. That was the Cody Bellinger Game 7 monster home run to give them the win. So I would say, along with my Wisconsin Badgers, this LA Dodgers team is the most emotionally taxing team to root for on a year in and year out basis. Just it's draining the fluctuations of emotions, how they vacillate so much. It's like I'm going through these emotional roller coasters every single time I watch the Dodgers play in the postseason. And again, I'm not out on this team, but they got to wake up and start taking this Braves team seriously now, because this is an Atlanta Braves team. Again, they remember what happened to them last year. It's fresh in their minds. They want to exact some revenge. Jock Peterson is on the other side. He's been huge. Jocktober is real. He probably feels to a certain degree like he's been slighted by the Dodgers, that they didn't prioritize him over some other guys. He's been huge for the Braves, so he's got extra motivation along with this entire team. Now, this Dodgers team has been proven to be extremely resilient all year. They were extremely resilient last year. I'm not counting them out. And the reality is they dominated the Braves at home this year at Dodger Stadium, where they're returning. They beat the Braves all 3 times at Dodger Stadium this year, so I have confidence that they're going to turn the series around. But I'd be lying if I said that it's not a little bit disappointing to have not taken one of those games in Atlanta. I thought that especially Game 2 there was there for the taking, was absolutely there for the taking, and Austin Riley did it to him again in Game 1. He was huge for them in Game 2. But I have confidence that the Dodgers are going to turn this around. But they got to start playing. They got to start closing these games better and bringing home more runners when they're on base. Just has to happen. It's got to happen. So I want to transition to tennis. No, I haven't talked about tennis for a little bit, and the Indian Wells Masters tennis tournament takes place in Palm Springs, California, in Indian Wells. Just took place or wrapped up this past weekend, and for most casual observers, most casual tennis fans, they're only familiar with the 4 major Grand Slam tournaments, right? The Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open, all of which have already concluded for this 2021 calendar year. The next series of Grand Slams begins next January with the Australian Open of 2022. But throughout the entire year, there are a bunch of ATP 1000 or Masters 1000 tournaments, which are more minor kinds of tennis tournaments that take place throughout the entire year. They're a little less profiled, but again, if you're a tennis fan, they're still pretty big tournaments in the grand scheme of things. And so they're obviously on the women's tour, it's called the WTA 1000 tournament events. And the Indian Wells, or the BNP Paribas Open, or the Indian Wells Open, however you want to call it, is arguably the largest minor tennis tournament that takes place, excluding the Grand Slams. The difference between these minor tournaments and the Grand Slams, it's always a best of 5 sets. In these ATP Masters 1000 tournaments and WTA 1000 tournaments, it's best of 3 sets. So it's a little bit shorter. It's not as stretched out. But you could argue that, again, the Indian Wells tournament, this tournament that just took place, is perhaps the biggest tournament excluding the majors, excluding the Grand Slams. And it was evidenced by the winner's purse, by the way, which is $1.2 million for the winner of this minor tournament. And again, it's always hosted at Indian Wells. It used to be at La Quinta, California since 1987. It got switched to Indian Wells. But yesterday was the first time that the tournament concluded after having been paused for 2.5 years due to COVID. So really special kind of time to be bringing the tournament back. And again, it's normally played in March because of COVID. This got pushed into the fall now. There will be a Indian Wells tournament again this March. And there were a lot of notable players, no doubt, that didn't play. You had the Djokovic's and the Federers, Nadals, Naomi Osaka, Serena Williams. A lot of these marquee names didn't play, but there were still a lot of incredible tennis players on the tour that were playing. Daniil Medvedev was playing, who just won the U.S. Open. And this is why I want to transition to talking about the men's and women's winners from this tournament. So Cameron Norrie on the men's side. I want to start with the men's side for a second. Cameron Norrie, he beat Nicolas Basilashvili in 3 sets. And he actually overcame a 1-set deficit, lost the first set 3-6, won the second set 6-4, 6-1. He became the first Brit, because he's from Great Britain, to actually win the Indian Wells tournament when ranked outside of the top 25. He was ranked 26 entering the tournament. It's only been done 3 other times. I will tell you about the 3 other individuals that happened in my Malkin's Moments at the end of the show, my last segment. But Cameron Norrie, so he goes from being outside of the top 25 to now catapulting into the top 11, winning his first ever Indian Wells title against a really good opponent. He had to beat Diego Schwartzman in his draw earlier just to reach this point. I love Diego Schwartzman, the Argentinian. He's shorter, but he's extremely quick, agile, gets to everything, tremendous energy. He had to overcome that type of player. But what impressed me most about Cameron Norrie is the fact that this is not a power hitter. He does not play a power baseline game. He's not going to overpower his opponents. And that was the case against Basilashvili. Basilashvili was just raking tennis balls all over the court. He was ripping winners down the line, cross court. I mean, he had 23 winners, Basilashvili did. Norrie only had 10 winners. But it was the control that he displayed and the precision and the angles that he was working beautifully. He just didn't make mistakes. And he kept Basilashvili at bay throughout the entire match. And again, so Norrie's not going to overpower you. And the interesting thing about him is you watch him play, and he only made 23 unforced errors. Basilashvili, he induced Basilashvili to hit 44 unforced errors. So the control and the accuracy was so much better for Norrie. And the interesting thing about him is he's got a very unconventional backhand. Because if you watch his backhand, he has a very short backswing. He keeps his arms very extended out to the side, which is traditional, but he doesn't bring his racket back very far. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to generate power, because the farther back you're able to bring your racket, the more you can activate your hips, the more you can turn your hips to help generate some power. So he doesn't do that. Cameron Norrie almost doesn't generate quite as much of a hip turn, and instead is just able to kind of rely on his extension with his backhand to make good contact with it as a southpaw. So it's impressive given the fact that, again, traditional methods say if you're trying to generate more power on the backhand side, you need more of a hip turn. He doesn't do that. And yet he was still able to control a lot of the points off his backhand side. He did a great job using his forehand to get sharp angles, especially cross court. And he was the much more dominant serving and return of service player. That was really the difference, is he won 77% of his first serve points, as opposed to just 55% for Basilashvili. And his return of serve, when Norrie returned 44% of Basilashvili's serves, he won those points, as opposed to just 20% for Basilashvili. So he dominated his service game. He controlled the return of serve, won the majority of those points, and he made fewer mistakes. Again, just 22 unforced errors as opposed to 44 for Basilashvili. And when it comes down to the thing that I don't think people understand when you watch a lot of these tennis players play, and I had the privilege of going to the U.S. Open this past year, seeing these guys play up and close, is a lot of these guys ranked in the top 50 are all sensational players. There aren't necessarily huge margins that differentiate them. What does differentiate them when you're looking at the nuanced differences is the level of consistency. The footwork is slightly better. The consistency is there. The precision is just that much more better. The mental game, the mental toughness is just there a little bit more. Because Basilashvili, again, when he was on in the first set and a half, he looked like the far superior player. He was relying on that power baseline game, which is a really common strategy now in tennis, especially with the way that the rackets are built. You can generate a lot of power from the baseline. That it looked like he might have been able to run away with it, but he kind of lost a little bit of steam. And his body language by the end of the match was one of defeat. He was kind of giving up on certain points. He thought points were over. Turns out the balls were still in. So he was a little bit kind of off guard, a little bit off kilter in the last set. Now, he claimed that he was battling some kind of injury. He wasn't trying to make any excuses, but the reality is he didn't feel particularly well. That may have been the case, but I'm not going to touch on that today. I want to give Cameron Norrie his credit because, again, I was extremely impressed with him. And I just thought he did a better job sticking it out, showing a little bit more toughness and resilience. And a major shout out to him. This was a major win, even though it was a minor tournament. So big congratulations to Cameron Norrie. That was an impressive win. Now on the women's side of the Indian Wells tennis tournament, Paula Badosa defeated Victoria Azarenka, just edged her out in a match that nearly, I think it actually eclipsed 3 hours in play time and match time. She edged her out 7-6, 2-6, 7-6. Again, it looked like the match lasted at least 3 hours, if not more. And for Paula Badosa, the 23-year-old Spaniard, this was her first Indian Wells tournament title as well. So the winners for the tournaments, both the men's and the women's draw, winning for the first time ever. And it's extremely impressive. She became just the third woman to win in their Indian Wells debut. I'll touch on who the other two were in my Malkin's moments. But when I think about Paula Badosa and the path that she had to go through to win this tournament, and mind you, this is someone who is just 23 years old, having a tremendous season. She won at Belgrade, the Belgrade Open, earlier this year. So this is her second title of this 2021 season for her. And again, taking home this purse of $1.2 million. This is a major, major victory for her and her tennis camp. And what's impressive is here you have someone who was ranked 87th just 12 months ago. And you fast forward to now, and entering this tournament, she was ranked 27th. Now that she's won this tournament, it looks like she's going to jump into the top 15, if not top 13. And when I looked at her draw, this is someone who had to go through a higher-ranked Coco Gauff, who is the rising American 17-year-old. She had to beat Barbara Krejcikova, who's the 3 seed in the tournament, talented 25-year-old. She had to beat Angelica Kerber, who was the 10th seed in the tournament. This is someone who's won 13 career singles titles. She's a 3-time Grand Slam winner, a seasoned veteran, and doesn't get much more seasoned than going up against Victoria Azarenka in the finals, who is a former number 1 player. She's won 21 career singles titles. She's a 2-time Grand Slam winner. In fact, she's won at Indian Wells 2 times. She was vying for some history too. She was vying to become the first female to win the Indian Wells Open 3 times. She's done it twice. No other woman has done it 3 times. So Azarenka had history that she was playing for as well. And this is someone who's 32 years old. She gave birth to a kid not too long ago. And while she might appear like she's younger at age 32, this is a woman who's been on the tour since 2005, since she was like 16. She's been on the tour for over 16 years, since 2005. In fact, she was playing on the ITF circuit since 2003. So you're talking about Badosa having to go up against individuals that are not only accomplished, but have been on this stage before and have excelled. And not only did she have to beat her in one tiebreak, she beat her in two. Not only one, two tiebreaks. Badosa prevailed over Azarenka. And when I watch Badosa, and this is something that I've said about a lot of female tennis players that I've seen over the last several years, is just the power that they play with. She was aggressive. She was playing with confidence, especially on the backhand side, just stepping into every single shot, had tremendous body weight behind it. And she was hitting a lot of balls deep. She kept the balls along the baseline and just grinded it out. And the fact that she was able to outwill Victoria Azarenka, which is hard to do. Not a lot of players can outwill Victoria Azarenka. The Belarusian is kind of known for just grinding people out, staying with it. And Badosa was able to overcome that. And again, just 23 years old. I thought that both players showed tremendous class. And it was very impressive, again, on the backhand side in particular. You see it often on the forehand side. Players are really strong on that stroke. But the backhand side, for her to step into just every single shot she could, her body weight was fully behind every shot. She kept them deep. And it was kind of a slugfest out there. And Badosa pulled it out. It pulled it out. And this has kind of been the year of firsts in many ways. We saw Emma Raducanu. She won the U.S. Open. That was her first Grand Slam at age 18. And now we're seeing Paula Badosa winning the Indian Wells Open. It's just exciting to see this fresh blood and kind of these fresh new faces bursting onto the tennis scene. It's starting to make names for themselves. It's really, as a tennis fan, again, I'm an avid tennis watcher. I'm an avid tennis fan. So this is a big tournament to me. Again, it's not a Grand Slam, but it's probably the biggest non-Grand Slam tournament of the year, arguably. There are a couple others that you could say are close seconds. The Miami Open is pretty big. The Madrid Open is pretty big. But Indian Wells is about as big as it gets when it comes to non-Grand Slam tournaments. So big shout-outs to Cameron Norrie on the men's side and to Paula Badosa, both winning the Indian Wells Open for the first time in their careers. Extremely, extremely impressive. Big shout-out and congratulations to them. And speaking of big shout-outs and big congratulations, the Chicago Sky, the WNBA team based in Chicago, won their first ever WNBA title, knocking off the Phoenix Mercury in 4 games, 3-1. And really, this was a landslide victory. This was a decisive victory that featured a team that just flatly was way better than the Phoenix Mercury were, with the exception of than the Phoenix Mercury was, I should say, with the exception of one game 2 loss in which the Chicago Sky lost to the Phoenix Mercury on the road by 5 in overtime. Their 3 wins, they won by an average margin of 18.5 points. So this is not a fluke. The Chicago Sky were clearly the better team in this entire series. And it was impressive that in game 4, Phoenix led by 9 entering the fourth quarter. They led by 5 with about 5.5 minutes to play, and yet they still managed to pull it out and just outwill the Phoenix Mercury. And in particular, I'm extremely happy for Candace Parker, now a 2-time WNBA champion. The fact that she's from Chicago, she returned to her hometown, and to deliver a title to that city, the first ever WNBA title in franchise history, is a heartwarming story. It's a really touching story. And Candace Parker has a spot in my heart because we as Angelinos, we kind of view Candace Parker as a staple in LA sports when it comes to WNBA. She started her career and really just played the majority of her career with the Sparks. She was drafted by the Sparks in 2008, won Rookie of the Year in 2008 with the Sparks. She won 2 WMVPs, regular season MVPs with the Sparks, delivered a title for the Sparks in 2016, was the finals MVP. So we kind of view her as one of our own, and I'm happy for her to see her be able to win another title. She just embodies winning. She's the ultimate winner. She's one of the greatest WNBA players of all time. This is someone who won 2 NCAA titles at Tennessee, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. And when I think about the greatest, and then you combine that with who she was facing, and who this entire Chicago Sky, for that matter, were facing, going up against the legend in Diana Taurasi, who's arguably the greatest of all time, a 3-time WNBA champion, and Brittany Griner, who had a fantastic finals and, in my opinion, is probably going to be a future Hall of Famer. She's had a tremendous career. But when I think about Candace Parker and how she stacks up, I think she was already going to go down as one of the greatest WNBA players of all time. But when I look at the list, I think she was already, in my mind, a top 5 player. I think you can make an argument now she's in the top 3, along with Diana Taurasi and Lisa Leslie and Tamika Catchings. Then you're looking at Candace Parker, Sue Bird, Maya Moore. I don't think played long enough, but I think Maya Moore is up there as well. So that's in very exclusive company. For Cheryl Swoops, obviously, is in there as well, but I think Candace Parker is perhaps a top 3 player of all time. At the very least, I think a top 5, but you can make an argument for top 3. And again, for her to be from Chicago and to still deliver this title is impressive, is extremely impressive. And what's also impressive is the fact that in 2014, this is the same Chicago Sky team that got annihilated by the Phoenix Mercury. In fact, Courtney Vandersloot and Allie Quigley, who were 2 important pieces for this Sky team in 2021. They were part of the Sky team in 2014 that lost to the Mercury, to the Phoenix Mercury. So you know that there was some elevated motivation for that matchup in particular, and that was still fresh in their minds. It was their first taste of the WNBA finals, of really kind of the postseason, but for them to kind of bounce back the way that they did, and Kalia Copper, for her to win finals MVP as well. Extremely impressive, happy for her. But sticking with Vandersloot, the interesting thing, she's been just fantastic for the Sky this entire postseason, especially as a facilitator. She's just been breaking records as a facilitator. In fact, she obviously recorded her second triple-double, or the second triple-double in WNBA postseason history in the semifinals. She recorded 102 assists, which is a record throughout this entire postseason. So she was fantastic for the Sky. And just this entire team, I thought, just played extremely well. They just dominated from start to finish. Not to mention, they were a 6 seed. This wasn't even a top-seeded team. This was a 6 seed that went 16-16 in the regular season. And since the team's inception in 2006, in which in that inaugural season they went 5-29, now they bounce back after missing the playoffs in the first 7 years of the team's inception. They're finally able to fast forward several years later and win a WNBA title. Big congratulations to the entire team and to that organization. A very, very well-deserved and impressive victory. So shout out to them. Okay, final topic before my Malkin's Moments. I'm excited. It's the NBA season that's beginning tomorrow. The 2021-2022 NBA season commences tomorrow. You have the Brooklyn Nets, Sans Kyrie Irving, and the LA Lakers. But the Nets are going up against the Bucks, the defending champs. You got the Lakers playing host to the Warriors. It's a great time. Great time in sports. I'm always super juiced up and excited for the NBA season to start, especially for my Lakers to get back out onto the hardwood. I'm excited for both of those games and just for the entire opening week slate. There's always a great slate. But this is where I want to give my early season predictions as far as which teams I think are ultimately going to make the playoffs, be a guaranteed top 6 spot, and the 4 teams from each conference that I think are going to be a part of, at the very least, the play-in tournament. Not going to decide right this second which of those play-in teams are going to be in the top 8. I'm just going to give you top 6 guaranteed from each conference and the 4 play-in teams from each conference as well. So when I start with these are the picks. These are the picks starting with the Western Conference first. This isn't the order that I think the seeding's going to go in. This is simply clustered together which teams are going to make it in these select categories. So LA Lakers, of course, they're going to make it. Whether you think the combination of Russ, LeBron, and AD is enough to win a title, it's certainly enough to guarantee them a lock to make the postseason. That's a given. The Utah Jazz, every single year, they had the best record in the NBA last year. Donovan Mitchell continues to just get better and better. I love Quinn Snyder. They still have Bogdanovich. I think that Mike Conley, hopefully, if he's healthy, he can be a little bit more consistent for this team. Rudy Gobert, Joe Ingles. I still love the components of this team. They're a lock to make the postseason at the very least. And so are the Phoenix Suns. That's the 3rd team right now. They had the 2nd best record in the NBA last year. Did the Phoenix Suns a tremendous story. Chris Paul, they return everyone. Chris Paul, Jay Crowder, they signed Mikal Bridges. DeAndre Ayton, yes, he's still at an impasse a little bit in contract negotiations, but he's still going to be back with this Phoenix Suns team. So is Devin Booker. They're going to be a playoff team for sure. The Golden State Warriors, I've talked about them before. I'm really bullish about them. I think Klay Thompson's coming back, Steph Curry, this entire roster. Andrew Wiggins finally realized and came to his senses. Let's just get the shot and get this over with. So I do think this Warriors team will have a bounce back year in a major way and are a for sure lock to make the postseason. I think the Denver Nuggets are going to be the 5th team that are guaranteed to make the postseason. Jamal Murray's coming back from a torn ACL. Nikola Jokic, the league MVP from last year, is back. Do I think that Michael Porter Jr. is worthy of a 5-year, $200+ million contract? No, but they didn't have any other option. They had to give him that kind of contract because otherwise they were going to lose him. I don't begrudge him for taking that. Big shout out. Congrats to him for being able to collect that amount of money. But the fact that he's getting paid more than Jamal Murray, I don't know. I think you probably know that the answer should be no to that. But regardless, he does deserve a certain amount of money for sure. So I still think he's a good player. The team is always consistent. Mike Malone always does a great job coaching them up. And just whenever you try and count out the Nuggets, they're always in it till the end. So this is a team that's for sure going to make it. And then my 6th team that I think is a guaranteed spot, I will concede this one's a little bit flimsy of a pick. I think that the Dallas Mavericks this year finally are able to secure themselves a top 6 seed. I know they did it last year, but it came down to the very end. I just think Luka Doncic is that special. He's that good. He continues to get better every single year. I just think the Dallas Mavericks this time, with the injuries to some other teams, I do think that this is going to be the year that they have a little bit more consistency. Perhaps they live up a little bit more in the regular season to what we think that they can be. And then the 4 teams I think are going to make the play-in. I think the Clippers are going to be in the play-in game. They obviously don't have Kawhi Leonard for the majority of the season, but I think what we saw from Ty Lue and how good of a coach he is, he can still bring the best out of Paul George and Reggie Jackson is back, and Batum and Morris and these guys. So I still like the mental makeup. Terrence Mann, I think, might continue to make a jump this year. I still like the mental makeups of the group of players that they have. So I like the Clippers in the play-in. I like the Memphis Grizzlies. Don't count out Ja Morant and Dylan Brooks. Jaren Jackson just signed a big contract. He's back with the team. And listen, grit and grind used to be their motto, and I still think that they possess that. So I'm a big believer in Ja. I just love Ja Morant. So I think the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be back in the play-in tournament. I think that the Portland Trailblazers, this was a really hard team to evaluate because I don't know if Damian Lillard is going to be a part of the team long-term or not. And quite frankly, whether he is or whether he isn't, I still don't know what to do with Portland. I do think that the hire of Chauncey Billups was a good one. But again, I don't know for sure what this team is going to be. They always seem to be like a 7-5 type of team, and I'm just not sure if I'm quite as convinced on them this year. They didn't really make any offseason changes. They didn't have any notable signings other than they re-signed Norman Powell, which I'm happy about. He's a UCLA Bruin, but even if Damian Lillard stays, I think they're still just a bubble playoff team in the play-in tournament. And finally, the Sacramento Kings. Yes, I think this is finally the year that the Sacramento Kings can reach some type of postseason. I've talked about this. I think that the signing of Davion Mitchell, the fact that they drafted him, was huge. Defensively, it's going to help them out. Is there a little bit of too much good stuff in the sense that you have King, you have De'Aaron Fox, you've got Davion Mitchell, you got Tyrese Halliburton, you got a lot of guys that play similar positions, but I think that this team finally, they've always finished right behind the playoff bubble. I think that this is finally the year that they're able to at least crack in to the play-in tournament. Now switching to the Eastern Conference, the locks to make the postseason for sure. The Brooklyn Nets, regardless of what happens with Kyrie Irving. The Milwaukee Bucks, of course, the defending champs. Philadelphia 76ers, same thing. I still think Doc Rivers is a great coach. I think the team is still a really good team all around, regardless of who they have, that it's good enough to, at the very least, be a playoff team. The Atlanta Hawks, they were my surprise team last year, and they were not only the surprise team, but the team that I picked to be the biggest surprise in last season. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They're getting Cam Reddish back and healthy. I like him. They're getting DeAndre Hunter back and healthy. They still have Kevin Huerter, still have John Collins, Trae Young, of course. This is still a really good team. Still a really good team. I like their pieces. I think they're back. Miami Heat with Kyle Lowry, I think, are a sure lock this time. I don't think they're going to be fluctuating along the bubble. I think they'll make it. And then finally, this is a little bit of a bold pick. I do think that the Boston Celtics are going to avoid the play-in tournament. I think that they'd probably be the sixth team to make it. I'm excited to see what I apologize. I want to pronounce Ime Udoka. I want to make sure I pronounced his name properly. The new head coach for the Boston Celtics. He was the Brooklyn Nets assistant. I kind of like that hire. I think that signing Josh Richardson and Dennis Schroeder on the cheap and not Evan Fournier. They lost Evan Fournier. But Dennis Schroeder and Josh Richardson, I think were kind of sneaky good picks, especially pickups at the price that they got them for. And then in the play-in terms, so I think those are going to be the six teams. The four play-in teams, I think, are the New York Knicks. I think that they're a legitimate playoff team. I'm not sure if I can say I think that they should be a top six team consistently. I thought last year was not a full aberration. I wouldn't say that. I don't know if they're going to have the fourth best record this year, but I still think they're good enough to make it. I'm a big believer in the Charlotte Hornets. I think that LaMelo Ball, I love his game. Gordon Hayward hopefully is healthy this entire season. PJ Washington and James Borrego is a great head coach. I just like the makeup and the confidence that this Charlotte Hornets team plays with. I feel like every time we watched the Charlotte Hornets last year, we kept saying to ourselves, oh, all of a sudden you look at every game that the Hornets are playing in, and oh, they're in this game. Oh, they're leading this game. And you kind of found yourself shocked every time you saw it, but I'm not shocked. because I think LaMelo Ball is the real deal. I think LaMelo Ball is the real deal. I think this is a year that they can crack in to a play-in game. I like the Bulls. I like the Bulls to be in the play-in. I know that the fit of Levine, Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic might not be the most harmonious fit, but I just think from a talent perspective, it's enough to carry the day and at least get them into the postseason, at least in the play-in tournament. And then finally, another kind of questionable pick, but I'm going with the Indiana Pacers. I think that Rick Carlisle is a really good head coach. He'll invigorate this team. You look at the components, and I've always been high on this Indiana Pacers roster. I really like Sabonis, really like Malcolm Brogdon. TJ Warren, I think, is a really good player. They just haven't been healthy all at the same time. And it's a shame now Karis LeVert is out. I hate to see that for them, but I just think Rick Carlisle is going to find a way to get this team into this play-in tournament. So those are my early preseason playoff predictions. Cannot wait to watch the postseason tomorrow. Not the postseason. Can't wait to watch the start of the regular season tomorrow. Again, Nets at Bucks, Warriors at Lakers. You know I'm going to be wearing my jersey tomorrow. Cannot wait for the start of the NBA season. Just gives me fireworks and chills just thinking about it. Okay, final topic. My Malkins moments. Have some great Malkins moments. I alluded to many of them throughout the entirety of this show. The first, Lamar Jackson topped Dan Marino's record for the most wins under the age of 25. Lamar Jackson has accumulated 34 wins before the age of 25. He's accomplished so much and is still just so young, already an MVP winner. And the career trajectory that he's on, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I love watching him. The Ravens, 5-1 this year. He's having a tremendous, tremendous season. They have the best record in the AFC right now. They've got the best record in the AFC, and he is the main reason and the main catalyst behind that team's success. Justin Herbert, another really talented, rising quarterback in the AFC. He just reached 6,000 passing yards. The Chargers quarterback became the second fastest player ever in 21 games to reach that career milestone. And again, he's another player for the LA Chargers that is having a really fantastic sophomore season. The Chargers, despite getting shellacked by the Ravens yesterday, still 4-2, best record in the AFC West. And you just look at him and visually, he looks the part. 6'6". He's got the poise. He's got the presence. He's got the composure. He just possesses all those great traits that you see in quarterbacks. So not surprised, but big shout out to him for reaching that milestone. The Chicago Sky captured their first WNBA title. Major shout out to them. They knocked off the Phoenix Mercury in 4 games. Kalea Copper was the WNBA Finals MVP. Shout out to her. She averaged 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, and assists per game on 50.5% shooting from the floor, 14 of 16 from the free throw line. So she was efficient. She had 2 games of over 20 points. So really kind of provided the offensive spark that the team needed. And again, as a 6th seed, the Chicago Sky are the lowest seed to win the WNBA championship since the WNBA went to its current playoff format several years ago in 2016. And their head coach, James Wade, became the 3rd black coach to win the WNBA title. The other 2, Michael Cooper won with the LA Sparks in 2001 and 2002, and Corey Gaines actually won with the Phoenix Mercury in 2009. And of course, Diana Taurasi was a part of that team as well. So big shout out to James Wade. In tennis, I talked about this before earlier in the show. Cameron Norrie and Paula Badosa winning their first career Indian Wells Masters tennis tournament title. Cameron Norrie was the first men's tennis player ranked outside of the top 25 to win the tournament. He came back to defeat Basilashvili 3-6, 6-4, 6-1. Ivan Lubicic, apologies, I probably butchered his last name, won in 2010. Alex Correttia in 2000 and Jim Courier in 1991 were all ranked 26th when they won the Indian Wells tournament. The only other guys, those were the only other guys ranked outside of the top 25 to win the tournament since the tournament moved to Indian Wells from La Quinta, California in 1987. So big shout out to Cameron Norrie. Big shout out to Paula Badosa. As I mentioned, she won against Victoria Azarenka 7-6, 2-6, 7-6, a match that lasted over 3 hours. She became just the third woman to win in her Indian Wells debut. Here are the only two others. She joined Bianca Andreescu in 2019 and Serena Williams in 1999 as the only others to win in their debut. And so far, that is some pretty good company. Final Malkin's moment for you, and then I'll wrap up. I'm wrapping up a couple minutes past my time. The Boston Red Sox. They are currently in a 1-1 series against the Houston Astros, and they defeated the Houston Astros. The Boston Red Sox did in Game 2, 9-5. But what was special about that Game 2 is J.D. Martinez and Rafael Devers both hit grand slams in the first and second innings. J.D. Martinez hit a grand slam in the first inning. Rafael Devers hit a grand slam in the second inning. They led 9-0 at that point, and that made the Boston Red Sox the first team ever to hit 2 grand slams in the same postseason game. So fantastic finish for them, and I'm looking forward to seeing and talking a little bit more about the ALCS Game 3 is tonight. That'll do it for us. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter, at Jonah Malkin on Twitter, or at morning_Joe_. That's J-O. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, jmalk97, or TikTok, Jonah Malkin. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.